owner of this place. She's the one welcoming us into her home. Lan has been such a wonderful host. I met her through Vivian. Before the holidays, we did a pop-up market here, and she was just so gracious and welcoming. They made a lot of sacrifices to build this restaurant, build this cafe, this bar. It's a labor of love. She's an artist. She supports artists and creatives and is welcoming us here today. So talk to her if you want to host something, if you want to talk about anything. There's your woman right there. So Lan, thank you for having us. Really, really appreciate it. Yeah, there you go. That's cool. I want to give a shout out to Vivian Lin, who is a climate comrade of mine. She was the one hosting the event that brought me here. Vivian is also in the food waste space. She runs Ground Cycle. Has anybody ever heard of Ground Cycle? Yeah? All right, cool. Very good. She started a compost pickup service during the pandemic, didn't know how to drive. Love it. Vivian, you want to just like say hi for a second? You want to? Yeah.
I work with a bunch of local farms here in New York, Long Island, and we basically pick up food waste and drop off farm veggies, closing the loop between waste and compost. And since then, we also partnered with so many local businesses to distribute their products that are sustainable. We do like hard to recycle stuff like plastics and beauty packaging, all these things that we're constantly adding on. And the holiday market was basically bringing together the community for the first time since we started in 2020. And I'm really grateful for some of you guys knowing about Ground Cycle. Excited for this talk.
Thank you, Vivian, for doing this. Thank you very much. I want to give a shout out to a new friend that is going to become a climate comrade, Celeste. Hello. Celeste responded immediately when I sent this email out about this event, saying, hey, I'm a master composter. Anything you need, if you need me to be on the panel for you, whatever. I was like, okay, well, I think we're set, but at least let's give you a moment. Celeste, would you like to share about your superpowers? Hell yeah, Celeste. Thanks for doing what you're doing. Yes, very good. Moving on over here in the back, a very gentle giant, a good friend of the family. His name is Mitchell Grant. Have you guys ever heard of the Marketplace of the Future? I mean, I guess that's like why people are here, right? I mean, we've been on that. Okay. Mitchell was instrumental in having the Marketplace exist where it did at the start at Lehigh. So anytime Mitchell's around, it's a good thing. So please, we need to give Mitchell a round of applause. And Neil Ludevig is one of my closest friends. We run a podcast together called Leave Looking Up that's coming out this month. It's Monday, and it's all about uplifting conversations about the state of the world. And as of 2022, Neil is our first board member of the Marketplace of the Future. So we're going to level up big time this year thanks to those two gentlemen. So huge shout out. Matthew and Kira. Matthew running the live stream right now, ultra creative soul. Kira recording the non-live stream version, ultra creative soul. Thank you guys for being here. Shout out to them that are documenting this evening. And then to bring it all home, I have to shout out to Alex and Spencer and Theon. some of my closest friends that are volunteering and helping this all come together, and then Mandy and Travis, who jumped in last minute to put up the wallpaper. So there we go. It's a moment of thank yous all around. Now, why are we here? How did we end up here? What the hell's going on? To set the context, and Hillary, would you like to come up, and Nick, would you like to come up and help warm this stage up with me? That'd be really great. What's happening here, the company is called Future Meets Present. It's an idea, it's a context. The thinking is, imagine the year 2050, once we've already, quote unquote, solved the problem. The data is out there, the science is out there. We know what needs to happen. What does that future actually look like? That's what Future Meets Present is all about. So we do a variety of things, including the Marketplace of the Future. One of the other things here that, oh my God, I am so sorry, I completely forgot. Akshita, we have to give Akshita a shout out over here. I'm sorry, this light is super bright. Akshita is actually one of my students. I teach part-time at Parsons, and she volunteered, put her hand up to help map this conversation so that we can look over as we're having it, take some notes, look what's going on. We're going to take those notes and send them to you after the fact. And so, wait, big shout out to Akshita, please. Thank you. Thank you. And what she's sitting under is one of the things that we do at Future Meets Present. It's called co-working in space. And everybody in this room has now officially received a passport to co-working in space. It is a virtual co-working space. It's free to access. The URL is coworkingin.space, and the QR code will give you that access. When you're in there, you have a small avatar that walks around, exactly like Akshita is about to do. And the way it works is when your little avatar stands next to another avatar, you can talk to each other. So you can take your meetings in there, you can jump up and see me and Neil, or most of the time, freaking 1 o'clock in the morning, we're up there like working on stuff. Swagzilla is his username. And there's where we organized the Marketplace of the Future. You can see it right there. So that's what you're gonna see in the QR code. A little bit of admin, a little bit of context. After the Marketplace of the Future, we had a voting on which climate solutions are most interesting to us. And food systems emerged as the winner, which is why we're here today. So we have 3 panelists today. One is down the street. Henry's going to be arriving. It's going to be hilarious because he's going to walk straight in right up onto the stage, but that's the way we do it. And until he arrives, we're going to be chatting with Nicholas Karam, who is one of my closest friends. Yeah, there you go. Go ahead. Yeah, it works. Thanks, Spencer. And a regenerative farmer. Nicholas is the embodiment of regeneration. He does it not for a particular company or an organization. He does it because it's the right thing. He's the one that's constantly talking to me about no-tilling, about what were we talking about? Which legumes help pull up nitrogen the best?
They all do.
They all do.
All the legumes.
All legumes, okay. So we talk about legumes sometimes. We're going to talk about regeneration, what that means. Hillary Bosch from DSNY, here to talk to us about, here to talk to us about composting and the vision of what that will look like in the coming decades. So thank you guys for being here. That was a really long intro. Appreciate your patience, but welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's go ahead and just start. And then Henry is going to be coming from Reborn Farms. I'll let him introduce himself when he arrives. Let's start with an opening question. What's alive for you right now in your lives? When you wake up in the morning, where does your energy go? Where does your attention go when you think about in the morning? What's alive for you? You got him. I have him. Yeah.
Hello. Hi, everyone. What is alive for me is simply the land and where we're going with it. It's winter, and most people think the land is sleeping during winter, but it's just metabolizing really, really slowly. So during this time, farmers are still planting their next crops, putting cover crops in early, getting ready to cultivate, and starting stuff in the greenhouse. So basically, we're looking at acre by acre and seeing where the land is going and listening to the land. And I think it's really important to, as we see the shift in seasons, it's a big time not only for ourselves, right, like inner change, but also the change in what's happening in the world right now. So from California and like the egg shortages, if you are seeing what's happening, $8 a carton is a lot of the food system's changing right now, and so that's pretty much what I wake up and look at the price of eggs. That's basically. But yeah.
Hi, everyone. What do I think about on a daily basis? Well, my New Year's resolution, personally, was to take notice when I use plastic. There was an article that came out in the New York Times where a man tried to avoid using plastic for 24 hours, and it was impossible. And it is impossible. Going fully zero waste is impossible. So personally, I'm just trying to be more mindful of my waste, is what we're all here to talk about, to think about. And then with my role at sanitation, I'm constantly trying to think of the next thing that people are going to need when it comes to composting. The city is trying to meet people where they are, but of course there's so much more demand than the city can provide for any category, but for composting as well. And so I'm always trying to think of new ways to innovate answers to new questions that I never anticipated before, find new ways of outreach, and find new ways of connecting to people that may not have thought about their waste or their food waste in the past.
Where would you guys say that this journey started for you? I'm very curious. Have you always been thinking about composting? Have you always, what's that like?
I was just telling my partner that I always love the show Bones, so maybe I've always had a thing for decomp. I don't know. Bones is just a good show. No, but I, like many of you, I've always been interested in sustainability, biology, government, all that. I'm from Louisiana originally, so I've always had an interest specifically in disaster mitigation and recovery. And it was in college that I interned at FEMA, and in that time, in 2017, Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. And a huge conversation around that I had never considered was waste management. There's all this wreckage. Where are we going to put it on an island, which is a challenge Manhattan faces every day? And a big part of that was also, food waste, because I think apart from other kinds of waste and debris, apart from your classic recyclables, this is like an amazing opportunity to solve a problem, namely, where do we put this stuff, but also to use it as a resource like classic recycling and make an overall benefit to the environment, do a net positive, net good, which, on a regenerative farm, I imagine you're very familiar with the power of composting. Yes. When it comes to agriculture and augmenting crop yields and retaining wastewater, purifying the soil, all that good stuff, preventing erosion. And so that's what brought me to composting. I thought waste management was really cool, and I think, as you know, with Ground Cycle, there's a lot of opportunity for growth, specifically in the food waste field.
Awesome. Well, from Louisiana, we'll definitely have to talk about plaque mines at some point, or what's left of it. But anyway, for me, I grew up in and around the city, and being here in school and working as a kid, I was always fascinated by how food just kind of magically appears at restaurants for 10 million people. And my background is actually started in finance and tech, and technology led me to working with local restaurants, and from there learning about the food system, how they're sourcing food. And once I went to the farmer's market for the first time and tasted a tomato that was a real tomato and not a supermarket tomato, I was like, wow, this is completely new, and how does it taste so different? And so I just started asking farmers, like, can I show up at your land and plant stuff or weed, put me to work? And I definitely didn't have a clue what I was doing, but they were patient with me, as farmers usually are, and started to expand my knowledge there and spend some time with indigenous people and learn about how they look at the land and how they cultivate. And that was a complete shift in my mindset, coming from basically suburban New York, manicured lawn, to like, hey, weeds are good and they provide a very specific purpose in our ecology. And from there, I just wanted to start growing on my own. So I joined community gardens in New York City, particularly in Brooklyn, and just started getting my hands in the soil. And that was really where I found a lot of love for spreading that. And then during the pandemic, when it first started, I moved back in with my family and basically dug up my grandfather's lawn and planted a bunch of vegetables. He hated it, but I figured after 2 years, I was like, okay, I'll go find a bigger place that is dedicated for farming. And so now we're actually working with an estate in Westchester to revitalize an old orchard. So they have a nice piece of forest land constantly being encroached by suburban pressure. And this is kind of our goal, to create a beacon there and create something new in suburbs, and show people that not everything has to be a grass lawn. It can actually provide jobs and food and ecological benefits. And the more acres we can get that on close to the city, I think the better.
I feel like I've seen a lot of lawn hate online,
There's a
and I
lot of
love
lawn
it.
hate.
I love it.
Well, now it's become a meme, you know. Yeah.
Has anyone heard of the Three Sisters? Does that ring a bell? I see some heads nodding. Yeah. Kyle? What's that? Yeah. You want to
Nice.
say a little louder?
Squash, corn, bean rotation for nutrients in the soil.
Yeah. Nick's grandfather's name is Claude, and he's a wonderful, wonderful man. Love Claude. It's in Claude's lawn that I think you were testing this out, right?
Yes, yes. So it was basically a degraded patch of land that sloped down into power lines, tons of invasive weeds and ticks, and I just spent the entire winter clearing it out and planting, and within a year, an area that basically had maybe, I don't know what kind of grass, but it was not a native grass, had probably about 100 different species of plants, native plants, some endangered, many vegetable varieties. Do you know the fourth sister, by the way? Typically sunflower. And the point of the Three Sisters, which you bring it up, is the symbiosis that plants have with each other. The permaculture movement takes some of this into account with layers and levels, but really the science is incredible once you dig into it, about how different root systems are interacting and the bacteria and fungus in the soil are interacting. So it's a bit of a rabbit hole, and like I totally nerd out on the regular, as I'm sure you do it with compost. Like you can't stop. It's like so much.
Yeah.
I wonder, Nick, if you can give us a sense of the current state. Like, what does soil look like nowadays as a result of the way we've been consuming? Like, what's the vocabulary? Just help us understand what the current state is.
Sure. Well, the first thing we look at is topsoil, right? Because topsoil is where the fertility is. Some topsoil will go an inch deep. You know, if you go to Cancun or you're familiar with that area, their soil is only about an inch or two deep. But if you go to the prairies in the Midwest, the topsoil can go down feet, yards. And that's due to the way humans have interacted with it for 1,000 years. 95% of that or so is gone. It's oxidized from tilling and industrial agriculture, and it takes a very long time for that soil to form. Maybe this is not for your podcast, Positivity, but the United Nations estimates we have 50 years of food left. So unless we change our ways. So, hey.
Oh, Henry, come on up. Yo, guys, Henry's here.
What's up, Henry?
Sick. Yo, what's up? Hey. How are you? How'd the call go?
Hey.
Amazing. Good.
Nice to meet you. Hey.
Hello, everyone.
Here, wrap up your thought, and then we'll say what's up.
Well, that's about it. The state of the ecology is very, very threatened on a daily basis, and at the same time, there's a lot of movement and activity from change makers, people who are returning to the land and want to do something about it. So I'm really excited about that personally.
What's the topsoil, and then it would just be considered just soil? Like, is there a distinction between
Yeah, I mean,
lower soil,
probably
bottom?
better to ask like a proper soil scientist, but there's many like layers of soil, and there's classifications, and it gets less organic as you go down to the actual mineral soil that's been like broken down from rocks over millions of years. So the complexity there is incredible, and we've basically kind of made that complexity very bland by overworking it. So our biggest goal right now is to restore some of that complexity, because complexity is resilience.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna bookmark that. That's sick. Thank you. What's up? Welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you
All
for
right.
having me.
All
Such
right.
a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Round of applause. Henry made it, y'all. How's it going? The first question was, what's alive for you? You want to introduce yourself? Tell us what you're up to.
Yes. So I am Henry Obispo. I am the founder of Reborn Farms. And essentially, we're building a decentralized food system in the Bronx, specifically focused on agricultural technology. And more specifically, engaging with populations that have been disinvested in for generations, like the one I come from, which is the South Bronx. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the South Bronx is considered the poorest congressional district in the country, right here in the richest city in the world. It's a huge shame, and it's been so for about 6 decades now. And so our aim is to really focus when it comes to food access, and also building capacity locally when we're thinking about an economic development component that actually has people develop their lives and their families through this system that we're creating, where there is access to food, but also there's this workforce development that's very important in connection to the community. So for example, our partnership with the local community college, it's really important to develop that pipeline, specifically in an area of ag tech, which for the most part, I've been one of very few people of color in the space. And it's really about democratizing it also. And I would say that our project is also very unique because we are launching the first farm on public housing nationally in the Bronx.
Keep it going a little bit. What are we? Help us visualize. What are we talking about here? It's what's the ag tech? Define ag tech.
Yes. So essentially, we are engaging in agriculture through a technological way, and we consider that to be hydroponics, aeroponics, etc. Specifically, in the first component that we're developing on NYCHA, it's a hydroponic system. It's a 10,000 square foot farm that will allow for a massive production of food for the population, and not just any type of food. We want nutritionally dense food. And what does that mean? That means those dark greens specifically, but also when we're talking about food, we're thinking about culturally relevant foods that look like the population, not just like we're trying to impose a type of greens or foods to the population. We want that input, and that input, we have it also because we're based on a 4-year pilot that we launched that ended in 2019. And so that 4-year pilot was just considered, it was just so powerful, but also considered the most successful food justice project in the Bronx, and possibly one of the most successful ones in New York, where we engaged for 4 years local elementary schools, local restaurants, NYCHA, the hospitals, the cultural institutions, all under this idea of engaging from a holistic point of view. And how would that look if we took advantage of, and we took that whole look at the community and not just one aspect, or say, oh, they just need access to food and provide that from wherever that comes from. It's about a system and using and creating a new system, because you can't get out of this current reality with the same paradigm.
Solid, man. I love it. So what we have here is a high-level snapshot of soil health and restoration. We have the integration of technology and farming practices, decentralized systems, and workforce development. And we have composting and municipal action. Speaking on the note of piloting, I understand we just went through a pilot, right? Can you speak to us about New York City's compost pilot program?
Sure. So you've probably heard the words compost pilot program from the city in the past. They've been having them for the past 30 years. It's just nonstop. I mean, and it's for a good cause. I swear. I think in some ways we're giving the public whiplash, but in other ways we're really trying to find the best possible way, the most efficient way, and the most accessible way for people to compost their food waste. New York City has one of the most diverse housing stocks, populations, backgrounds, everything, and it's very challenging to find a program that works for everyone's needs, meets them where they're at, and doesn't demand too much of their their day-to-day life. People have enough problems. So what we just did in Queens, it was a new version of that. In 2021, we rolled out a version of the program where you had to sign up or opt in. And this was an effort to make the routes more effective. Only go to houses that want to participate. If you want composting, we will come directly to you. And this was very successful in optimizing the routes. It was not successful in being inclusive. For example, we could only go to high-rise buildings where the management had signed up because we wanted to ensure that someone would put out the bin. And that's a big hurdle for people that live in areas whose management already deals with, enough trash, enough recycling, that don't have the bandwidth, or just don't even respond to you. So that was a big hurdle for people all over the city. And we were rolling out in a way that tried to meet the most demand. But of course, the most demand is where people are most informed and interested in specifically composting service, which usually means the more educated areas, which usually means the wealthier areas. And so there were massive gaps on the map, which was not good for anybody. So the new program that rolled out in Queens rolled out to the entire district. Everybody, if you had recycling, which you're required to do, you had composting. And it lowered the barrier entirely. No sign up. If you live in a high-rise, we're automatically bringing you a bin. If you live in a small building, you can ask for one, we'll drop it off. Or you can use whatever bin you have, as long as it's got hard sides and a lid to keep out the critters, which really lowered that barrier to signing up, to bins, to all that. And you could just put it out whenever you put out your recycling. It was a huge success. It was really, really successful. Yeah.
Did anyone live in Queens? A couple people? And does anyone not have curbside composting from the city right now? Nice. Okay. Yeah. Define success. What was that?
Sure. So again, it made it so much easier for people to set stuff out. If you lived in a big apartment building and your management still said, "No, I'm not going to take out a compost bin. I get off at 3, and I don't feel like doing that." Literally, anyone can put out a bin with a compost sticker on it, and we'd pick it up. And so people did that. And they were like, "Fine, if you don't want to take it out, I'll take out my own bin." This also meant that people who hadn't heard about the service before got a mailer in the mail in English, and it also linked to 12 other languages saying, "Hey, you might not be familiar with this, but we're coming around your block. You may as well put it out. You're already putting it in the trash." So that brought in a whole new group of people that had never participated in composting before, and it showed in the tonnage. Over that 3-month span that we were in Queens from October to December, in the sign-up districts, we collected about 300,000 pounds a month, whereas in Queens, we collected about 900,000 pounds a month, which is just astronomically better. Unfortunately, one drawback that always comes with every rollout of a city program is trying to maximize efficiency, which is code for staying under budget. The way to stay efficient in the sign-up program was to go point to point and maximize the route. The way to stay efficient when you're going to every single house in Queens is to pause it in the winter. So it's definitely not ideal, but we went to Queens initially to try to get as much yard waste as possible. That's where the tonnage is. It's in yard waste, and statistically, winter has the most minimal yard waste. Of course, the land is just resting, but it has the most minimal yard waste. So we picked that time to pause. But we look forward to coming back for the spring, and we look forward to eventually begging for the budget to make sure this doesn't happen again in the future.
Yard waste.
Yeah, it's weird hearing that like in the city.
I know. And that's why we went to Queens, because it has such a diversity of housing stock. Astoria looks nothing like Forest Hills. And food waste is very dense, but also those areas with lawns and with sprawling properties, they have food waste and they have yard waste. And you would not believe, even in a city like New York, the number of leaves, specifically leaves that sanitation collects a year. We collect over 3 million pounds of leaves a year. It's insane. So that's why we went to Queens, because that's where the bulk of it was. Of course, a lot of it's also in Brooklyn.
Put your hand up if that's surprising. Yeah. Wow, yeah, seriously.
And this is private leaves. This isn't park leaves. This is private property leaves, personal leaves.
Not street trees.
Not street trees.
Wow.
Private property leaves. So, so we saw the tonnage in Queens. We went, and it showed up. They gave it to us.
What are the high-level numbers we need to think about? So, like you just said, this program diverted 300,000.
Right, average of about 300,000 pounds a month for opt-in, average about 900,000 per month for Queens, per district, yeah.
Do we have a sense of how much organic waste is thrown out a year, or like big picture stuff? Like what number can we hold in our minds?
Sure, I'm happy to give you those numbers. They haunt me day and night. And now they can haunt you. So every 5 years, Department of Sanitation is mandated to do what's called a waste characterization study, which basically means we rummage through the garbage. My coworker Victoria is working on this right now. She smells very bad, but she's doing her best, and it's for the benefit of us all. And the most recent one was in 2017. They're working on the next one now. The findings in 2017 showed that 34% of the waste stream is technically compostable. For context, another 34% is metal, glass, plastic, paper, and cartons.
Okay. That could be recycled.
That could be recycled, yeah. And then another 9% on top of that is also what we call divertible materials. It's like textiles, e-waste. So that means over 2/3 of our waste stream has no place in a landfill. It is not waste at all. It's a resource. And that last 23% is really where source reduction comes in, because it's material that cannot be recycled, like plastic films, candy wrappers, things that are very small, et cetera. So 34% of our waste stream is compostable. And here's some other numbers I can throw out. Last year, we collected about 17, when was it? Let me pull up the exact number. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. I want to say 17,000 tons. Yeah, that's correct. Last year we collected about 17,000 tons, of organic material. However, sanitation collects over 10,000 tons of refuse a day. And that does not add up when it comes to 1/3 of the waste stream. We're collecting a fraction of 34% of the waste stream. Which means there's a lot of material, specifically compostable material, that we're not diverting. New York City, in the original recycling law, Local Law 19, that came out in 1989, mandated that New York City divert at least 33% of its waste by the year 2020. It is 2023, and as of 2022, we diverted only 17% of our waste stream. Again, 2/3 is technically divertible. So we have a long way to go. And recycling is on the books, recycling is mandated, composting is not. So we're working towards not immediately making it mandatory, but just giving people as many options and as many possibilities, and making it as easy as possible for people to divert that waste. Because no one wants to trash the planet. It's just hard.
Right. Y'all, what's coming up for you guys right now? What's going through your head?
Astronomical.
I mean, you spoke of the program, and I remember trying to get in my building in the Bronx, and they were like, I had to go through the management, and then and I tried, but it didn't work. There's like roadblocks, but the way that you explained it, and the way it's sort of like was re-engaged, I think is brilliant, because it gives the power to the people to decide, as opposed to like a management where it's inconvenient for them, and then you force the issue in many ways. Yeah.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. People want to compost. This is something that should be accessible, and we should be meeting them where they are and not asking them to jump through all these hoops. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really curious because in Japan, their waste stream is like, there's like 10 bins, right? And they're like super strict about it. Have you thought of how the city could either like directly incentivize the building owners or like work with companies to do that? You know, I'm sure the city doesn't want to cut that tax income, but maybe that's where like private companies could come in and support.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone who was in New York over the pandemic knows that most city-funded composting programs were cut, and it made this huge vacuum where there was just no city-funded resource, and that's where so many incredible, businesses and nonprofit startups saying, we will tote your food waste, we will bring you veggies, we will bring you finished compost. And there's a balance between wanting to make this accessible for everyone and empowering people to do it without forcing them to do it. Again, for context, recycling has been mandatory for decades, and we still are reaching minimal recycling diversion goals. So mandatory isn't always the answer, but it is when you live in an apartment building and your super won't do it. I don't have curbside composting. I don't. And I have talked to my management and I said, I run this program. This is ridiculous. Like, yes, I'll take out the
You should get
bin.
ground cycle.
I should get ground cycle, rub it in their face. And so it's, the challenge is there, and people, all around the United States look at New York and they're like, oh my God, can I curse? Yeah. They're shitting the bed. Like, they're doing a bad job. Everyone's like, San Francisco does this, Tokyo does this, and they have these amazing programs, but New York is just a little more challenging because we have such a different population and our housing is so different. We have more skyscrapers than San Francisco does. We have more lawns and widespread, like almost suburban housing than cities like Toronto. We just have a different culture with it than maybe Portland does. We have more languages spoken. Every single thing that sanitation creates, we have to translate into at least 12 languages. Yeah.
Gents, how about high level for you guys? What are you seeing in terms of, are there any numbers that we need to know about, or any laws, or any role models that we should be looking towards?
That's a good question. I think role models have a long way to go, but the West Coast does do compost pretty well. But again, just numbers. I will say Tokyo has like double or triple the population, so I don't know what our excuse is. But it's a mindset, the people have to want to do it, and I think here in the capital country, the capital of the world, like, money talks. So I'd be really curious, like, what the biggest costs are in that chain for just sanitation. Like, is it driving the trucks around?
No, that's totally fair. It's a little bit of everything. It's labor costs, and it's truck costs, and it's toting costs, and it's disposal costs. There's a price for every waste. I will say landfills are pretty expensive. Yeah. Because ever since Fresh Kills shut down, New York City doesn't manage or doesn't dispose of any of its own. Right. We send landfill waste to New York. We send landfill waste to New Jersey, to Ohio, and even as far as South Carolina. It's insane. Landfill waste is very expensive, whereas composting is actually a cheaper option, large scale, because we manage most of the composting within the 5 boroughs or within a brief drive. So a lot of the costs for landfills are way more, but for composting specifically, it's again paying for that processing, paying for the labor, and each of these trucks is very expensive. Each truck is hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so right now we're currently looking for the budget to buy more trucks and expand those routes. Yeah.
It'd be really interesting to, speaking on decentralization, how you could start to distribute the composting by like neighborhood even, or where people, it's just, the vision I'm getting is like people on bikes picking up your compost and just dropping it off at one of the empty lots. There's like 1,000 empty lots in the city, right? And let them get a little tax break there. You know?
Yeah. City, or my unit particularly doesn't work a lot with commercial businesses, unfortunately. I was just talking about that today. There was a coffee shop in Brooklyn that's like, hey, we're happy to accept food scrap drop-offs. Can the city pick it up? And we don't pick up commercial waste, so it's a little tricky.
Why?
It just we don't want tax money going to individual businesses. That's this tough part. Unless they're contracted to do a service, we don't want to. That's why if you run a business as Pink Frog is, you have to hire a private carter.
Right.
DSNY only collects residential and nonprofit waste. Yeah. But I think that we're talking about like the future, what it could look like in 2050. I think that's a great idea. Like reducing emissions and collection, using bikes, making it even more small scale, making sure that our waste doesn't always go out of state or to Fresh Kills or even to deep Brooklyn if you're in the Bronx or in Manhattan. But making those community compost sites that are community run, community managed. And there are plenty of them, but they're not at the scale that I wish they were.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When it comes to decentralizing, it's really interesting and important to like look at the history, not just of these ideas of decentralizing, but waste management and where these sites are usually placed. And they're usually placed in communities of color, red line communities. You can look now, and that's where most are. Many of them are in my neighborhood, and we're trying to get them the hell out. And in terms of decentralizing, in terms of composting, there's that component, yes, but then there is this idea of where is this waste going? And we need to start thinking about our waste and where we put it and the social implications of that, and how we're thinking about actually centralizing this idea of waste management, maybe at one of the islands, Roosevelt Island. They're currently closing Rikers. So it could be that that's where we compost, that's where we centralize waste management to get them out of, black and brown neighborhoods and any neighborhood, because you don't want to be next to, these facilities. And so it's about actually centralizing something like that when it comes to sort of the way forward, I think.
No, that's a great point. It's funny you bring up Rikers. They have one of the most successful compost programs in the city. Rikers Island has a thriving compost facility that maybe we can convert the entire island into a better compost facility. But no, that's a great point. The city for a long time trafficked most of its waste through the South Bronx, which is why there are astronomical asthma rates in the South Bronx. It was only recently that they woke up and thought, hey, maybe every borough should manage their own waste, which is why there's a marine transfer station on the Upper East Side, which made a lot of Upper East Siders very unhappy. It's like, where do you think your trash is going?
Yeah.
And you're right. In some ways, decentralizing the benefits of it and bringing everybody in and getting the community involved, but also not marginalizing anybody or giving anyone disproportionately more risks from the waste that we all create. Absolutely.
Yep. Well, it sounds like there's some interesting. Oh, whoops. It sounds like there's some interesting ideas in the combination, right? Where like the central processing has that economies of scale all in one place, but it seems like it's way more hours of work to go door to door rather than like one lot of a neighborhood.
Yeah. So it's definitely a multi-pronged approach. For some people, they prefer curbside because they're either homebound or they don't want to go out and drop it off. It's as easy as throwing away trash. For other people, you're right. They don't want it. They don't want it in their house. I speak to plenty of people who live in curbside neighborhoods, and they're like, "Yeah, I have it, and I wish I didn't. I want to go bring it somewhere else." And so that's why sanitation, regardless of how we do curbside or like apartment by apartment composting in the future, will always have options. Curbside is one, drop-off composting is another. There are sites that manage it. There also, has anyone seen the smart bins around the city? They're really cool. Oh, yeah. Yeah, a very shared one. They are these big belly compactors that you can open with your phone and compost on the go, on the street. They are amazing. They're open 24/7.
An orange
bin
on the street.
Yeah.
I had an apple core in my freaking pocket for like 4 hours the other day because I couldn't find anywhere to compost it. I usually just like toss it in a bush. Sorry if that's like,
No. No.
you know, Johnny Appleseed it. But there's the smart bins now. Please continue.
Yeah, but no, sometimes you want to do it at home, sometimes you don't. And there's also community composting, and there are people who want to get more involved, get their hands dirty, literally, and that's at-home composting. Again, speaking of the future of composting and how I see this advancing, I see all of those categories advancing based on what people need and what they prefer.
I want to get into the future in a moment, but can y'all, so we've heard a lot about where our food waste should be going, where it isn't going. Let's talk about how our food grows. Can you talk to us about your project upstate?
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, just set the context and tell us what you're up to and what the vision is there.
Yeah, so as I was sharing a vision before, imagine the number of grass lawns in suburban New York. And they're actually increasing, like in Orange County and other counties, because especially of the flight from the cities due to the pandemic, a lot more people moved up there, right? And farmland has become... It wasn't lucrative to own a farm in New York. The taxes are very high. Dairy farmers, which dairy is a huge part of New York's dairy industry, agricultural industry, has kind of been demonized in the city. So a lot of farmers basically threw the towel in, right? So they saw the soaring prices and they got out. So now this unmowed meadowland or grazed land, which is typically more productive and carbon sequestering than lawn, has now become lawn. And that, back to like what the state of agriculture is very much in New York, is disappearing or slowing down. So my goal is to reverse that on as many acres as possible. And to me, that starts with trying something new. And right now we're used to very large machine-run agriculture where these machines are very, very expensive to run. They're hitting thousands of acres at a time. And really per acre, they're only producing $3,000 a year, $10,000 a year, because they're growing what's called a monoculture, one type of crop that's sold in very, very large amounts. A lot of soybean, wheat, corn, that's not for human consumption. It's either for animals or for fuel. And a lot of that is actually shipped out of the country. So China is a massive consumer of American soy to feed their pigs. And that becomes pork that they then export back out. So for the it's a whole thing. For the last few decades, we've seen a big expansion due to globalization, right? And we've seen basically an exploitation of the purchasing power difference in the world, right? $1 in America and $1 in China goes a very different distance. And now, because of what's happening with trade and the geopolitics, it's not becoming so profitable to do that anymore. And people want to come back, but to the domestic production, and even, before that, like all the costs from transportation too. A cost to ship a shipping container is 3 times what it was 3 years ago. So all of these headwinds are moving us back to local production. And in that gap, we've lost a lot of farming generational families. So we're kind of starting new in many ways. So my goal has been to spark some interest in small-scale farming, right? How much we can produce on an acre or 5 acres, and how many people you need to produce on that land. There's people who have done it before. I'm not reinventing a wheel by any means. There are 2 people running 2 acres at a time, producing hundreds of thousands of dollars of produce in a very, very small area. And to me, that's the future of our food system. Going back to that, is a million new farmers in America, each growing on just a few acres, and that's very beautiful to me.
So the lawn in this project, you're converting a big old grassy lawn.
Mm-hmm.
Your vision is multiple seasons. You're looking 3-4 years ahead.
Yes, more than that actually, like 15 seasons and more.
15 seasons and
in
more.
perpetuity. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so just explain like the process of what that looks like, because I think what Nick is doing, you know, as one of his friends, I've been lucky enough to get pictures of what this patch of green grass looks like now, then, and what it looks like now. Like, you're kind of creating a little microcosm of what we hope to see rolling out more throughout the country.
Yes.
So raise your hand if you've gardened before or farmed before or lived on a farm before. Okay, so about a quarter. So the rest, like me, I want this awareness.
Sure.
What does that process look like?
Well, the style of agriculture that I subscribe to is called agroecology, and simply that's the observation and interpretation of natural patterns to grow our food. Nature's very good at this. It does it almost like a computer. It's automated. But we as humans, like beavers, are a keystone species, and we have a massive impact on the land. And actually, without humans, the land is not as productive. We have an ability to increase the productivity of the land. And we've seen indigenous peoples do this for literally millennia. The Amazon rainforest, the great forests of North America, which only remnants exist, were massive food forests. They were very hand-picked. To you or I, they might look like wild forests, but they were actually cultivated very, very gently over very long periods of time. So now that we've kind of regressed to this state of like over-extraction, we have to look at it in a different way because the land has been depleted. And the first goal is kind of reactivating the soil. What that looks like might be...
How do you reactivate soil? What does that even mean?
Conventionally was pumping in fertilizer. And that worked for some years until now we're realizing that it's polluting the water and creating algal blooms. And so now we're looking to alternative methods, one of which is compost. Very bioactive, right? There's so much life in that decomposition that when it's returned back into the soil, it's just picked up. But it needs to be picked up by roots, and that's what my bread and butter is, which is the biodiversification of the land. So looking really strategically at the science of plants and the uptake of minerals, specific plants that are going ham on phosphorus, and they each have a job, right? And it's this dance that's changing every year. So it's a lot of listening and a lot of like trial and error, right? I've grown things that have done nothing, and I'm like, okay, well, never again. Or maybe in 5 years when the land is ready for it. So it's been really humbling as well, because coming in, I'm just trying to like plant a bunch of seeds, and then I'm like, okay, well, now I have to listen a little bit more and see what's needed and what's the succession look like. Does that give you a little bit of a picture there?
I feel like we could keep going on the succession.
Yeah.
But what are you hearing, Henry? What
I love this. This was like poetry, because it's about that, right? That's what I support, even though I'm doing something different.
Yes. It's an ecosystem. That's everything that's happening right here, right? Like we're like Avengers. I love that metaphor of Avengers, that each of us has our own superpower, and we need everybody, right? So please.
Yeah. So, I support that 100%, and I think that that's the way forward. And there's so many groups around the world that have been doing this for millennia, like you said. A great example of that is the milpa, the Mexican milpa, which is in many ways, you go to a Mexican household, for example, I often go to Oaxaca, and it is a mainstay. Like you have a milpa, which is essentially where you grow. It could be in your backyard, it could be on the side of your house, or it could be a larger scale one. But the idea is that plants are in communion with others, and everything that you're growing, it grows together, but they are in a dance. There's a language there that they've understood for a long time, and it's been passed down, and there's an understanding of that, a deep one, for a lot of indigenous cultures. I support that 100%. And even though what I do is very different, because my context is different.
Yes.
And my context is an urban reality.
Yep.
It is in a disinvested urban space. It is a food desert. It is not much land, a lot of roofs, a lot of concrete. And so what do you do to a population that's been redlined, like many populations around the globe or within this country that look just like the South Bronx? And so it's answering to that issue. And that's why it's important. You know, I will never choose that over that, because that is, you know, that's, I mean, soil is everything. But when it comes to feeding people and people having ownership of their food and not being relegated to systems, that is when agricultural technology can be of use in a good way to feed a population, so the population can have a level of sovereignty in an urban reality that in many ways lends itself to a trickle-down idea of like food eventually gets to you when it really doesn't. And so our project is to center where the needs are, because we understood that that's not true. It doesn't get to you, even though we have, for example, in the South Bronx, the largest Hunts Point produce market is the largest market in the world, literally in the South Bronx. Meanwhile, all the food bypasses us. And what it does essentially is that it goes everywhere that it needs to go, and then we get the scraps. Yeah. So this idea of like, even if it's in your proximity, you still don't get it unless it's intentionally done for you. And so in essence, that's what we're doing.
I would venture to say that you're not far off from what I'm doing. You're creating chinampas on the roof, the aquaculture system of Mesoamerica, just with a little bit more plastic and metal.
Exactly. It's not brand new. This is not, they talk, you know, tech. Yeah, this has been done before. The Mesoamerica, this was the practice. This was in Tenochtitlan, you know. This was the reality there, and this is not reinventing like any wheel. This is a continuation of that on, you know, different mediums.
Y'all, I just want to honor our time, and like I want to get so much nerdier with you guys, right?
Yeah, let's get
Some
down.
hesitation.
I'm always down to get nerdy AF. I do want to honor the time. I want to like bring us home with an imagine statement. Imagine this, and then if you have a resource for us to follow up with, and then we'll take some questions. Lon is probably not going to kick us out, so we can hang. But let's begin to come home. Anyone that would like to start?
Sure. Imagine. Imagine a reality where you have access, where who you are, where you live, what you do doesn't determine whether you eat well or not, whether you have access to what you want when it comes to what nourishes you. And imagine if that also is the thing that also provides for you financially, and not just sustains you, but provides for you. And imagine if that is, for example, a tool, which is our philosophy, that food can be a tool for transformation. Imagine if we thought about it like that, and now build infrastructure around it, and now build economies around the idea of it being a tool, and actually being an opportunity to say, oh, we can actually build a farm here, and that will create jobs, and then that will create access. We can actually build a marketplace, and that will create jobs, that will create access, that will create sovereignty. And so this idea of food as a tool, it's a philosophy, but it's revolutionary, and it's actually something that we aim to do within our project. But it's also how I see the world. It is possible to do it because we're doing it. And the idea is that we then replicate this and show the promise of it so that it's no longer imagined. It's a reality.
Thank you for sharing that. DSNY sees food waste, and I see food waste as falling into two categories: edible and not edible. That's basically it when it comes to food. There is so much edible food waste that should be given to people who need it, and that's one part of the problem. But unfortunately, or for the better, we come at the second part, where it's either non-edible or it's edible that someone wasted. And I think a lot of where the initial problem solving comes in is that reducing our waste in general, being more mindful of the waste that we create, reusing even food scraps. You can reuse vegetable scraps to make vegetable stock. If you store them correctly, they can last for months. I realized only years ago that I was mis-storing some things by putting them in the fridge, putting some things not in the fridge, trying to make it last longer. And apart from making a more waste-conscious society and making a more reusable society, there's always going to be something left that cannot be recycled. And so we hope to create any amount of waste that's left into a resource. And that's what we try to do with food scraps. I see the future of that as being, I think something that we've talked about a lot today is access and education and making a better world for everyone. In New York City, in this dense urban environment, where reducing our greenhouse gas emissions are essential, where not burdening any one population with the bulk of our waste is essential, we need to meet people where they are. And in addition to meeting people where they are, meeting them with what they need. Some people need us to go directly to their house and pick up their food scraps. Some people need a place for them to drop them off. Some people need to be told to do it. Some people are never going to do it. Some people don't think it's important, and some people will never be convinced. There are still people who don't believe in climate change, which is just unbelievable when all the evidence is there. So I think it's meeting people where they are, but also giving them all the resources to empower themselves, educate themselves. And the main reason that composting is being pushed forward in a city-funded way is because of demand. It's because people want this, because people have done the work to educate themselves about greenhouse gas emissions, about the waste that they create, and they want a way to do something about it. They demand from their representatives a way to solve their own lives and to solve this global crisis. And people are listening. There's a bill in the city council to make curbside composting citywide. There's a bill in the city council to try to reach our zero waste goals. This is being pushed forward technically by the government, but the only reason it got there is because there's public accountability. So the first step is educating everyone about their waste, making everyone aware, and then giving everyone the resources that they need to do what they have learned that they need to do.
Thank you both.
What's that bill?
It's called Intro 244. It was proposed in the city council last April to make curbside composting citywide. They're still working out the details with it. It's still in committee. But sanitation is working with them to try to find a way to get it done as soon as possible, as efficient as possible, and as wide-reaching as possible.
Amazing.
Keep an eye out.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Quick on the storage of food. Sparked a memory that changed my perception of local food. One winter, I had picked my last tomatoes before the first frost and stored them in a cabinet and forgot about them. And cleaning out my cupboard in February, about 3 months later, I was like, wow, where did these come from? And they were still fresh in my cabinet 3 months later. So, storage is important, and the quality of the food, right? The minerality of it. But anyway, I'll keep it simple and hopefully vibrant. How many of you have driven down a Midwest highway and seen the endless cornfield, the monoculture, for as far as you can see, right? Yeah. pretty much everyone. If you haven't watched a movie that's had that. So instead, imagine instead of one crop, one thing, just a plethora of flowers, different colors, different vegetables, and most importantly, people working that land, right? No longer basically a robot, like cyborg extension. And I really think that's our way forward with creating healthy climates on this planet and within our communities as well. A super equitable solution, right? And like empowering people through the lens of food and their relationships with others that they build through that. So hopefully together and with your help, we can build that.
Hell yeah.
Yo, thank you guys. Yo, I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm very, my heart is full right now. Questions? Yeah, go ahead, Cam.
My question is, basically, it's just so kind of inspirational to hear you talk about biodiversity and the future of farming, an ancient indigenous wisdom, right? And to hear about the work that you're doing. And I'm curious if any of you have opinions on how we more deeply integrate the conversation about food justice and the conversation about sustainability. Because I feel like there are experts kind of in each area, but the work feels a little bit siloed from each other. Like
Yes.
there's one person really focusing on biodiversity of soil. And as you know, Amir said, we're Avengers and we need everybody. But how do we more deeply integrate those conversations that sometimes feel separate from each other and really feel like they need to be one and the same?
So let me repeat the question for the recordings. Can you frame the question? I'll repeat it on the mic.
Yeah. How do we more deeply integrate a conversation about food justice and a conversation about like agricultural sustainability?
How do we integrate food justice with agricultural sustainability?
I'll take a stab. I think it's about agreeing on a principle. I feel like it diverts because people understand that there are issues and they're sort of like engaging the way they know. But I think it's about going back to the core, and it's about decolonizing. That's the core. Some people want to engage in that, and others want to be surface level. And so when you're surface level, you can, fork and, do certain things or do sort of like angles to certain things, right? You can sort of like address something from a very particular way, which is really important. But I think that we won't solidify and come together and understand that it is one if we don't understand where it comes from. And it comes from a colonial model and an extractive model. And we all need to understand that and what that is to be able to move forward the right way.
I'm very siloed. That definitely spoke to me. I see something at its final stage, and I mean that's kind of the job of sanitation. I can't say that I have like a lot of stake in like making food, but like that's why it's so critical to have people that are good at that. I was just telling a colleague, I can't grow plants. I literally cannot. Yeah, not yet. I struggle with it. I definitely do, and so I definitely feel siloed in my field. But that's why it's so great to hear from people who are experts and can inform me. And maybe I can't grow their plants, but I can like help and like go yay on the sidelines. Hello, plant grower.
Hello, composter. I think a lot of it is about sincerity and sort of an unconditional intention for inviting people to the table. I think there's amazing resources that come out of academia, and then at the same time, it's very tenured, and there's not a lot of space for actually listening to voices that challenge. And I think that's going to take a big shift in mindset, right? And whether or not we have the power to do that alone or together, I think it has to be done with compassion, right? Because everybody has gone through their walk of life and has their lens on the world. So putting things into a perspective that they might understand, asking a lot of questions, and being open to something that flips your picture of the world on its head. Because that happens to me pretty much every day.
I think you also had already kind of answered the question just in your talk earlier when you were emphasizing listening so much, like listening to indigenous people, listening to the land, like that could be a big part of it.
For sure.
I kind of have to write it down, so sorry I'm reading from my phone, but I'm really interested in especially the growing of food. Living in New York, where we are such a diverse culture right now, how do you balance honoring native customs and species with the newer cultures that are here now and the desires and demand for cultural foods that perhaps weren't native here?
So let me repeat that for the recording. How do we honor native species with new emerging cultural trends? Thank you, Erica.
Well, I'll take that. I think we're at a point of no return, right? Of this melting pot and the internet. Like, it's kind of just everything is available to us now, and I think that's okay. I can't speak for the indigenous voice. I've just adopted it in some fashion and put my own mix on it. But I think doing some research on what grows really well here that you don't have to put all this extra work into, things that might belong here. And again, as cliche it is, listening a little bit. The city actually City Parks has a good resource for like native plants that are either in like dire need of being returned here or that grow really well here. And then as for food, I think it's important also to have fun with it and find something that you personally really connect with and play with it. It's okay. I think we'll be able to probably grow coconuts here in maybe 10 years. So give it a shot.
Just to build on your question, this whole like trying to break down silos. I'm curious. I mean, all of you guys sound like you had this like journey, right? To like start what you're passionate about, to like build something, to build it in a meaningful and it sounds like at scale way. So like as you were starting this and even now, like how do you guys find like who to collaborate with, who to build together with? Like just like to hear about your kind of day to day on how you're doing that. Like for instance, you're talking about the Bronx. I'm sure like you're like talking to a lot of different people. Like who are you talking to? What's going through your head? And how would you? Who do you wish you could be able to work with that you can't right now, for instance?
So you want to repeat the question?
No,
So the question was, how do you how do you form your collaborations? Is that?
Yeah, I heard like listening, but then it's like also how do you do, right?
Wow, that's big for me. That's everything, right? I mean, I am as strong as the community is because I come from community and I started as a community organizer almost a decade ago in the South Bronx, engaging in food, and I stand on so many shoulders. So this is not like brand new. I'm not reinventing any wheel. I just happen to see it from a very specific point and have happened to gathered information that allows me to see it like this and to engage it like this. And so for me, it's really important. And the way I started in terms of collaborating was through activism and through community organizing. But really, it was really about canvassing so I'm from there, right? So yeah, I grew up there, but that doesn't mean I know aspects of it. But now as an adult, it was engaging on a different level. And that means engaging with stakeholders, whether it was clergy, whether it was elected officials, whether it was business owners, cultural institutions, et cetera. And it was really, for me, about canvassing these groups, canvassing the area to know who's there, who's done this, and I did that for about 6 months. And that allowed me to have almost a blueprint moving forward, because I now engaged with all of these stakeholders, asking questions from a very solutions-based approach. And I was given all these answers, and I was then able to see where the gaps were. And I moved forward filling the gaps. So every initiative I created was about filling the gaps. So I knew who had done something similar or when it wasn't done. And because I had already intentionally engaged with pretty much everyone, I would engage them on partnering with an initiative. The way that I saw it, because I now had all of this information, I was connecting dots that probably weren't being connected before. And so bringing in fresh ideas that really motivated a lot of the population. And that was a way, you know, once an idea succeeded, that was a way for people to sort of like, you know, be impacted. And that led to collaborations with me and over 70 organizations locally. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's grassroots at its best.
Yeah, and it's
That's
not
great.
the easiest thing, by the way.
Yeah, I
It's what
bet.
you have to do.
It's hard to get just like your friends in a room together, much less all these organizations working together. I think what makes it easy for the city, what makes it easy for sanitation is kind of same thing. We're not doing anything that hasn't already been done. Backyard composting, we did not think of that. Drop-off composting, didn't think of that one. Community composting, didn't think of that one. And it's really just trying to perfect, make efficient, and then scale all these things that have already been going on for forever. And a big part of that is knowing who does it best. A lot of the sanitation hearings with the city council will include testimonies from people who run their own compost toting services. And they're like, this is what we found works best. Or when we do all these pilot studies and we talk to people in the area who are already involved, we're saying, you know what works for you? What do you want from us? What do you want out of your sanitation department? And another a big part of that, I keep mentioning it because it's such a hurdle in New York City, is language barriers and having the staff to reach people in their own language. Just a couple months back when we were outreaching to Queens, they sent me out to Bayside, and I was useless. I was useless. I only speak English, and I think giving people everything that they need to succeed and then doing it in a way that they're comfortable with will immediately help get people on your side and get people interested and just start the conversation. Literally start the conversation. I can't. Yeah.
And continue it.
Continue it.
Well, speaking to your point earlier about principles, I think it takes a shared principles that, in a way, like naturally attract each other, but it does take some intentionality. I've actually had some really good, really successful interactions with people on social media, because you can already see what their mission is by the way that they're posting. And then as for a local approach, join a community garden and get involved and find people there who start to attract you to this way of growing or this idea. And I really like the community garden approach because it's people at the end of the day, and on a small enough scale that it can really be very granular in the experience of growing food together. I live upstate. I moved up to the Hudson Valley to be a bit closer to the heartland of farming, and that's opened up my opportunities as well. Not that everybody can do that, but I encourage you to consider visiting more and meeting people up there who might need your support and in your hands in the soil too.
All right, y'all. Last question, actually from our live stream.
Sweet.
It worked. Thank you, JB Pitts. The idea of humans as a keystone species came up. And that's often presented in a negative context of climate change. Do any of the speakers have a message for people trying to renew that relationship with the land in a positive manner, but aren't sure where to start? How do we renew our relationship with ourselves and our land?
Well, simply, I think it's our choices. Our daily choices make a huge impact. Um, I eat a plant-based diet for the most part. I think that's a big impact, and also for people who ranchers and people who produce dairy, I think it's important to support them to some degree. So finding balance in those choices as well. What you're buying, are you buying locally from your farmer that you can ask where it comes from and you have your bag that you can fill it with, or are you buying the triple wrap plastic from the supermarket? And this is kind of like a touchy subject because I'm like, it ends up being like revealing your worst and best choices, and it's takes a bit of neutrality not to fall into like a judgment trap, right? So also being able to talk about it in a compassionate way about, again, where people are coming from in their lives, and nudging them very like as a friend and as someone also on that journey.
We all decay. It's gonna happen.
It's true.
We are inseparable from this cycle. We are inseparable. We are a part of it. And however, we've managed to make all this stuff that is not a part of it, all this stuff that lingers after we are compost. And I think that's just odd. I think it doesn't belong here. It doesn't have a place in this ecosystem. It's outside of it. It has no place in it. And so I think, to Mr. Pitts, that the way to reconnect is to make it a whole loop, to make everything that we do a loop, which in some ways, in reference to climate change, it means that every piece of plastic we've made has no place in the loop. So the best that we can do with that is reuse it for as long as possible. But a lot of what we do use does have a place in the loop, like wool fibers for clothes. We can put our clothes back into the loop. Using more plant-based or bamboo items, which puts those items back into the loop that maybe were outside of it when they were made of plastic. And putting all of our food waste back into a usable format, back into the earth, and not just siloing it away in a landfill where it's totally apart from us. It's out of the loop again. We have everything we need here to make a thriving biosphere. And for some reason, we keep taking things out of that essential life cycle, and we need to put them back in. And a big part of waste is putting it back in there.
I don't know that I should say anything. You both said everything. I guess I will add that to your point, in terms of not demonizing, I think there's something there. Even though, like, I'm vegan, right? I'm not demonizing anyone that's not, even though I do advocate for it. Because I understand also that there's a bigger reality than you and I. There is system. And to your point, going back into the loop, a lot of players in this system don't like the loop because they become irrelevant, right? And it's these systems that's literally less than 1% that have us in their loop. That's not really, that it's self-serving. So it's really thinking about us as individuals, but understanding that there's something bigger at work, and understanding that, when the system is not created for you to easily create a loop or to come out of the loop, right? It then becomes hard on the individual, and we can be also hard on each other, to your point about not sort of placing blame. There's a bigger actor here at play. And so we have to focus there. Obviously we can do it as individuals, and we will engage individually in a very just way with ourselves, each other, and our environment. But there are larger players, and that's where our gaze should be, in terms of, not just decentralizing and going back into the loop. It's understanding that there's a system that's preventing us, even if we want to, even if we're all going to. Like, it is this model of extraction and of self-serving, and it is an economic model also that perpetuates that. It is, reliance on oil. It is all of these things that pump out plastic that have to, like, we have nothing, almost no say in it, per se. We do, but it's just bigger than us. So if we focus on that, we can dismantle that quicker, as opposed to like just the individual.
Nope, you're so right. It's very difficult to close that loop personally and then globally, just because they've made it cheaper not to. Yeah.
Y'all, this is great. And there's so many themes. There's so many wonderful insights and bright spots that I'm hearing here. If you know me, and Neil's heard me talk about this a lot on our podcast, I have this principle, this philosophy that heartbreak leads to breakthrough. And we're experiencing it on an individual level in our own ways. We're experiencing it as a global culture, global community, these heartbreaks that are leading to breakthroughs. And now we're all one huge cybernetic network. We've done amazing things. We've done them in shitty ways. But now our breakthroughs are waking us up to what it is that we need in these respective lanes. And the solutions exist. There's a wonderful resource called Speed and Scale. Are you all familiar with the OKR framework? Objectives and key results. This is, if we click on Tracker up at the top, there you go, next to About. Yep. If we click on that and we scroll down a little bit, we see Fix Food. Yep. We click that, then we have this wonderful guide here. This is just one great example. These are the key results that are needed for the food sector to be net zero by 2050. Consumption, responsible rice farming, reducing food waste. The people on this stage are here with intention because, again, as Avengers, they represent parts of the bigger pieces of the puzzle that makes that complete picture. And that's just, to me, incredibly empowering. And I genuinely believe in humanity. And thank you all so much for what you're doing in your respective lanes and cross-pollinating a wonderful conversation. I didn't have to talk that much. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the space that y'all have been holding and for the work that you're doing that we don't even know about. We're going to adjourn here, but please let's continue chatting. Thank you again for coming. There's going to be a lot more. Akshita, big round of applause for Akshita, too. She's been like
Thank you.
taking notes this whole time. Our plan moving forward, y'all, is to take these notes, to continue mapping them. We're going to watch this recording again. We're going to populate it with some more quotes and references to what we've been talking about, and we're going to send you this in about a week or two. And what you've been doing here on this wall, and I'll invite you to do it again, put a Post-it next to one of these topics that's most inspiring to you. That's what's going to inform the next topic, the next conversation that we have. Continue demystifying what that future looks like, the one that we so desperately want and we know is in our hearts and is expressing itself right now. So thank you guys again. Big round of applause for everybody here. Thank you.
I was going to ask what your future of food is after listening to us pitch our case.
My future of food?
Yeah.
I see a time when it doesn't cost less than $1 to buy an animal. I see a time when that's expensive because it should be, because it's a life. I see a time when the solutions are desirable and irresistible and delicious, and the food that I'm eating was grown by you or someone within a few miles away. And when I'm ready to throw it out, it either goes in one of Vivian's buckets or in the brown bin or in the community garden down the street. I see a time when rice farming is completely reimagined and when all of these solutions that we see are realized. That's what I see.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Please enjoy another drink. And thanks again for Pink Frog for having us.